Welcome to week 12. We're in week 12. Explore the Bible. Coming to the end of the quarter, the end of spring, headed into summer. And today we're in Genesis 45. Excited about this. Let me just say, you may have heard it before. You need to read all of 45, but really, you need to read 42, 43, 44, and then 45, because you need to be ready to summarize or have somebody in your class summarize. Give them 5 minutes, 10 minutes to tell, here's what all has happened. Because it's an interesting story. It's a long story for sure, as we've had the brothers of Joseph's brothers have come to Egypt begging for food. Joseph has recognized them. They didn't recognize him. And he has now manipulated things to get them to a point where they have brought Benjamin with them at their father's. He was really objecting to that, but they brought him anyway, so that he could be there, so Joseph could see him. And now we're about to have Joseph reveal himself. So before we look at this passage, if you haven't already, be sure and subscribe, like, comment, tell me where you're watching from, share it with somebody else. Go to this website, give.exposedtochrist.com, if you want to support the teaching that we're doing and the mission stuff. Here we go. Joseph could no longer keep his composure in front of all his attendants. So he called out, "Send everyone away from me." No one was with him when he revealed his identity to his brothers. Okay, obviously, when you start at verse 1 here, and here it is, there's a lot, so you got to get 42, 43, 44. They've had several times back and forth from Egypt back to their home with Jacob. And now here they are, and they're having a big meal, and Joseph can't take it anymore. He says he couldn't keep his composure, right? He couldn't do it any longer. So he sends everybody out, right? And he reveals his identity to his brothers. But he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and also Pharaoh's household heard it. And Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" But they could not answer him because they were terrified in his presence. He tells them, right, "I'm Joseph." Now, catch this. He's weeping loudly, right? And they don't, they're afraid. They don't know what's going on. It says they are terrified in his presence. What's he going to do to us? The thing about it is, okay, you could read those chapters, those 3 chapters leading up to this, take you 10 minutes. But it takes place over at the shortest weeks, but maybe even a couple of months, that this whole process plays itself out. And so Joseph has a lot of time to think about what he's going to do, what's the right thing, praying, asking God, talking with God, how do I do this? What should I do? How should I respond to my brothers who treated me so horribly? And then, of course, he's grown up, right? He's been in Egypt for years now, a long time that he's been in Egypt. He has been leading this whole thing for 9 years. 7 years of good, and then the 2 years of famine. He's been leading this thing for a long time. So there's been a lot of time for God to do a work in his life. But the brothers, well, they're a lot like they were. It's why Jacob didn't want to send Benjamin with them, because he was afraid they'd kill him too. I think he kind of knew. He suspected something had happened, right? Well, and then they confess. And so he's he is skeptical, let's put it that way, right? So but they say, but we have to, if we want to get food, this is what we have to do. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Please come near me." And they came near. "I am Joseph, your brother," he said, "the one you sold into Egypt." Okay, look, here is when they say, because I don't know if they didn't recognize him, but here's when he tells something that nobody else knew. Nobody else knew that he had been sold into Egypt by his own brothers, right? "And now don't be grieved or angry with yourselves for selling me here, because God sent me ahead of you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there will be 5 more years without plowing or harvesting." I'll tell you, I believe this is what happened in Joseph's life after the brothers came, that God began to show him that this was not the way God wanted to do it, but that God had used it to bring about the end he wanted, right? Of saving the nation of Israel, of saving his people. And that Joseph being there was how God was going to save his people. Okay? So he tells them, God sent me ahead of you to preserve life. I think this verse 5 is a really important one, right? Because he's telling them, don't be grieved or angry. Don't be grieved or angry, right? God did this. God is the one who worked this out for us. Okay, then God sent me. Again, he uses the same phrase, right? He says this here, God sent me. Here, God sent me ahead of you to establish you as a remnant within the land and to keep you alive by a great deliverance. He sees all of this now. He looks back. I don't think there's any way in the middle of it he understands it, but he sees it now. When he sees his brothers show up and God begins to reveal to him, this, you can save their lives. This is why I've put you here. This is why I've raised you up to this spot, right? He doesn't get to that spot if the wine taster is not in jail with him, right? If the wine taster isn't in jail with him, then he doesn't interpret the wine taster's dream. And so all of this, right? All of these things, God used all of these things in Joseph's life to get him to this place. God sent him ahead, right? Therefore, it was not you who sent me here, but God. You didn't send me. He says, God sent me. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, Lord of his entire household and ruler over all the land of Egypt. This is who he is. He has become the leader, in a sense, of all of Egypt, because Pharaoh is listening to whatever he says. He's been given authority over the entire land. Only Pharaoh could overwhelm him, and Pharaoh's listening to him. This is amazing, right? So he tells them, return quickly to my father and say to him, this is what your son Joseph says. That's going to be a shock to him, right? Because he thinks he's dead. God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me without delay. You can settle in the land of Goshen and be near me, you, your children, and your grandchildren, your flocks, your herds, and all you have. There I will sustain you, for there will be 5 more years of famine. Otherwise, you, your household, and everything you have will become destitute. There's going to be 5 more years. He said that to them earlier back here, right? There's going to be 5 more years. They had no way of knowing there'd be 5 more years. Every day was just a day. They'd had 7 good years, but maybe they hadn't counted back and remembered. They didn't know to start counting the good years. They just were happening. And then they had 2 really bad years. And finally, they're starving to death. And they come to Egypt to try to find some food. And Joseph tells them, hey, there's going to be 5 more like this. You need to come here. You can live under my protection. I've got a place for you, right? You can come to the land of Goshen. You can be near me. You can bring everybody, all you have, and I will sustain you. I can care for you there. Tell him to come quickly. Look, your eyes and the eyes of my brother Benjamin can see that I'm the one speaking to you. Tell my father about all my glory in Egypt and about all you have seen, and bring my father here quickly. And then Joseph threw his arms around his brother Benjamin and wept. And Benjamin wept on his shoulder. And Joseph kissed each of his brothers as he wept. And afterwards his brothers talked with him. I think until you get to this point, the brothers are afraid they're going to die, that he's going to kill them. And he says, look, Benjamin, look, you can look at me. You see, you look in my eyes. You recognize, right? And then he says, bring my father. And then he throws his arms around Benjamin and weeps. And Benjamin weeps on his shoulder. And he kissed each of his brothers as he wept. And then his brothers talked with him. This is quite an amazing thing. You go back here and you see, it was not God. It was not you who sent me here. It was God. You see him here. You sold me into Egypt. All of these things that for his disciples had been, or for his brothers had been sitting on their consciences for years and years and years. Not just what they did to Joseph, but how they'd lied to their father, made up this story and just lied to their father about what had happened. It sat on their conscience. And now, when it gets finally pulled out at this dinner, at the end of this dinner, when he just lays it all out and reveals himself, and man, the guilt and the fear the terror that they had. That's what we've got back here, right? They were terrified in his presence. That terror had them thinking, well, we're done. It's over for us. And then to feel forgiveness and to be restored. This is the Christian who realizes the grace of God. This is the person, the sinner. Let me put it that way. Here is the sinner who sees all that they have done and is faced with their sin and the consequences of it, and then hears about the mercy and the grace of God. This is the thief on the cross, right? Who everything is settled in on him and he knows what he's done, and then sees Jesus saying, Father, forgive them. And he feels the mercy of God. This is the brothers in that instance, right? To go from terror to relief and gratitude and thanks and restoration and reconciliation. This is what it is. Hey, thanks for watching. Hope that's helped. God bless you for teaching. Appreciate that. Be sure and subscribe, like, comment, share with somebody else. We'll see you next time.